2 nights ago, I was at a men's evening, as it was presented, a gathering of young and elder men in Humboldt. And they wanted to ask some important and difficult questions. Well, one of the observations from one of the men who'd been around a long time is it seems, he said, that it's more difficult than ever to identify as a Catholic and to live one's Catholic faith. Many of you probably have the same sentiment, and we spent some time coming at that observation. And yet there are observations that come out from the past that not so much counter it, but maybe pierce this kind of state of affairs. One of them is my favorite from Chesterton that I've quoted before, and it's the famous statement about Christianity. The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. As we reflect on especially a gospel like today, Chesterton's statement is both inspiring but also very challenging. One of the other observations that came up the other evening was kind of the response that we see in the world to our state of affairs, of a lot of anger and polarization. One is to kind of respond to the polarization, and that is to attack, to stand up for yourself, and to fight fire with fire. The second option is to recede or withdraw and let all of this madness, this worry, this concern pass us by, almost sticking our head in the ground. It's an issue that Pope Francis has taken on a lot recently when he's talked about the problem of indifference. Well, then there's the third option, the option I would propose of the gospel, which is one of neither attack nor withdrawing, but being in the world, putting on the mind and heart of Christ, receiving and trusting in the one who is infinitely trustworthy. And it's not easy to trust in our lives today, and yet it's a feature of the Christian life. And in doing so, prepare for the adventure. The adventure. I continue to hear stories from people who talk about daring to trust in God and the adventure that follows. I still get questions about how I became a bishop. And some of you have heard this story, and I recall it because it really fits well with the issue of receiving and trusting even when you don't know you're trusting. Before I became a bishop, many of you know I was a principal of 2 Catholic colleges at the University of British Columbia called St. Mark's and Corpus Christi. And one of the things that my board of directors asked me to do was recruit students. Well, remember, Vancouver is on the Pacific Rim, and we get many students at UBC from Hong Kong, South Korea, even Japan, Sri Lanka. And so one of the board members had a connection to Sri Lanka. I went to Sri Lanka in early September to recruit students. And now, many of you know I have one weakness. Well, I have several weaknesses, but one significant weakness. I can't take the heat. I really can't take the heat. I'll take minus 40 to plus 40 any day. And I know when I say that, my African brother priests just shake their head, and they think that's absolutely crazy. But in minus 40, you can put more clothes on. Plus 40, well, you can only go so far. And so I'm in Sri Lanka for 2 weeks, visiting 2 Catholic high schools a day. I don't know if you know this, but Sri Lanka has a very big system of Catholic high schools. Well, after 1 week, I'm absolutely exhausted, and I'm overwhelmed by the heat. And so I go to my room, I stick my head in front of the fan, one of the few fans I could find, and I say, God, deliver me from this heat. I can't handle this. Well, then I open my emails, And there was an email from the papal nuncio to Canada. I'll never hear from him. And he said in the email, "Call me with urgency anytime, night or day." Well, that's a weird message. Well, I looked at my watch, and it was probably 2 a.m. in Ottawa. I'm not going to call him at 2 a.m. in Ottawa, so I'll call him at 6 a.m. So I had some things to do. I said Mass, and then I called him. Well, and the message was, well, Father Marco, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, is asking you to be the Bishop of Mackenzie. Do you accept? Well, what? I said, Mackenzie? You mean Mackenzie Fort Smith? He goes, yes. And I went, I think I went, okay. And he says, okay, what is okay? Oh, you accept. I said, no, Your Excellency, it's a figure of speech. I'm really, really surprised by this. Then the conversation went from there. It was also amusing, but I won't get into that now. Mackenzie Fort Smith covered a diocese, as you know, of all of the Northwest Territory right up to the North Pole. Well, the moral of the story is be careful what you ask for. You'll get it big time. But the other thing that happened with that is the utterly being overwhelmed at being called to be a bishop of a vast northern territory was when I said yes, and I called him back in 8 hours after some tight prayer and discernment, there was a lot of consternation and reservation. But when I said yes, it was like, God, I give you my life yet again. And there was a tremendous sense of comfort and adventure, a sense of adventure. I had no idea what this meant. I had no idea how I would respond, but I felt it was God's call, and how could I not say yes? I had promised to say yes at my ordination, of course. But I'm not the only one who faces that. I've also shared with some here about my brother. I have one brother, my brother Dan, and I remember when he was discerning marriage, well, he really didn't want to get married, at least as long as he could. He was very, unlike myself, a very calm, cool, collected guy. He was a wild man. And he was a very strong athlete, and he was had a very kind of adventuresome life, I'll just say. And he was very kind of concerned about settling down to one woman in marriage. But finally, he felt compelled to say yes to marriage. And shortly thereafter, Lori got pregnant, and then Alana, his first child, came. Well, it was a tremendous movement of trust to say yes to Lori and God's call to marry. And as soon as he said yes and entered into marriage in the relationship, something changed in him. And it really hit when his first daughter was born, Alana. It was like beauty soothed the savage beast. You know, just when Alana came, and all of a sudden, his love and focus was alongside his wife, focusing on this newborn. To say yes, when all the things are not figured out, trusting in that God has led you to this, you discern it, you say yes, wow, blessing ensures. I also am aware of a young man who, hearing God's call to serve him, wasn't sure what this would mean. And right now he's moved to check out the priesthood. It means giving up a very promising job, but as he discerns he needs to check out the priesthood, this is not a big issue for him. What is a big issue for him is, where is God calling me? And if it's called to the priesthood, may I say yes. If I'm called to marriage, may I say yes. But the most important thing for him, and this inspires me, is that he wants to say yes to God's plan, wherever it takes him. Well, there's many examples, and many people here have said yes to the Lord in their vocation. And there are probably others that are discerning what that call is. And may I say, the scriptures are full of examples about the blessing that happens when we say yes to God. Check out the first reading. It's 1 Kings, and it's an unusual reading in Kings, 2 Kings. And it's about a couple who dare to receive a prophet, the prophet Elisha. Now, receiving a prophet in the Old Testament is not an easy thing to do. Because when you receive a prophet is somebody who is wonderful, but also terrible. They are a man of God who can predict some pretty serious, difficult things. And they can be very demanding. That's the way it is with prophets. And yet, they overcome that temptation to not trust and to let fear creep in. And they are generous in inviting the prophet Elisha to stay with them and share their home and food. And they commit to doing that. And for doing this, the prophet will bless them. Now, they don't do it to be blessed. They don't expect the blessing. But they do the good that they know that God is calling them to do. And then the elder man and the wife who've never had a child have a son. A very prophetic kind of forecast, if you will, for the New Testament. Matthew. Now we get to the real teaching that is one of the difficult teachings of the New Testament. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Now remember here what the gospel doesn't say. It doesn't say, whoever loves father and mother instead of me. It doesn't say that. It says more than me, likewise of children. You know, is this not a contradiction of the fourth commandment? Honor your mother and father. Really, we get the kind of clincher of this passage in what continues. Whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. You know, the cross that is in any Catholic church, the crucifix, is a symbol not just of tragedy or difficulty. It's a symbol of embracing absolutely anything that comes to us in our life. And knowing that in Jesus, if we face even the most challenging thing, as Jesus did, the ultimate most challenging thing, not only life, but resurrected life beyond all obstacles, including death, absolutely absurd up until the time of Christ, is possible because of the love and the message, the mercy, the intervention of God into our world and into our life. Jesus' cross is the symbol of absolute dependence, absolute trust in God, no matter what, no matter how difficult an obstacle may seem. The other side of the darkness is the light. The other side of Good Friday, Easter Sunday comes, and it keeps coming. And no matter what, Easter Sunday has happened. Cardinal Newman once said about the tragedy of spiritual growth being missed, when he says, one of the greatest tragedies in the spiritual life is when brothers and sisters do not share their hearts with one another on the journey of life. We all know this is difficult. The saints have certainly expressed this. And we are called to be a community of faith in Jesus Christ and sharing our struggles and our difficulties in an appropriate way with each other, daring to trust those that God sends us as we trust in Him on the way. Profound issue for marriage, a profound issue for priesthood, a profound issue for us all. So what are some of the lessons in this? That, number one, God gives us many blessings. He gives us the blessing of our parents and children and of our family and community. And we should love and cherish and honor them. But we also remember that God is the ultimate blessing. He is the source. And as we face great difficulties and challenges, parents know this as children grow up and make some difficult, sometimes contrary decisions. Let the prodigal son story inspire you. The father did not want to give the inheritance away to the younger rebellious son, but he was always watching and waiting for him to come to his senses and return. And when he did come to his senses and return, he was not limited like the elder son would have had him be, but he imitated and represented the merciful heart of God, who knows that there's justice and truth as well as love. Secondly, love and care with a generous heart, and at the same time hold on to nothing that will be greater than the mercy and love of God himself. And then thirdly, trust and receive. Trust and receive. And be prepared for an adventure. We live in a culture and a world that is not doing a good job at trusting and receiving. It doesn't mean we're mindless, but it does mean that we are a people who always chooses the way of blessing and gratitude over the way of distrust and anger, or the other extreme, indifference. I am just not getting involved in anything at all, and I won't be disappointed. But isolation is not the way either. We go to the altar to do something that is familiar and ordinary to us, but is also the ultimate sign of what God does for us as he gives his pledge to us to give absolutely everything of his life for us. The Eucharist is just that. God not only blesses us in a prayer, but he gives his very self to us to take, receive, and eat so that we may intimately, mysteriously share in the life of God. Do you know where this will take you? I doubt you ultimately know. I don't when I receive the Eucharist. But I know it takes me deeper into the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ. And for this, what else would I do but? Brothers and sisters, we celebrate a Canada Day weekend when we reflect on not just the blessings that God has given us, but we reflect on the opportunity to engage in being a part of a people who bless and serve others. And may the way of Christ inspire us about what this means.